I won't try to swing this in my favour here by leaving out details or sugarcoating anything. I've been with my fiance for 7 years and we've been engaged for 3 years. We've tried to do a save the date 4 times now, and his mom convinces him to postpone every single time. It's always a, well, don't you think you have bigger things to worry about? Whether it be our living situation, we're renting and she thinks we should buy first because we aren't stable, or our money situation. This was her excuse after we loaned her $8,000 so she didn't lose her house, but we have plenty of money as my husband's an RN and I'm a lawyer. It's just always something. We planned for a family gathering in my mom's backyard. She has 3 acres and a beautiful pond and it's just perfect. And we're doing a potluck, so it's a very low-cost wedding. Plus, everyone we know lives within an hour of the location, so only giving a month or 2 notice is perfectly acceptable in our case. With all this said, his mom has 0 reason to try and sway us against it. But her newest argument is that we need to wait until our daughter is at least 3 so she can be our flower girl. She's an infant. Well, in December my husband and I talked and we decided we wanted to get married in August. I told him, don't let your mom dictate it, and he said he wouldn't and that he was tired of listening to her. Fair enough. But last weekend my mother and his mother both came for dinner and I was talking to my mom about what dress I wanted her to wear as the matron of honour. My husband's mom asked when we planned to tell her we'd decided on a date, and my husband said, when we told everyone else. She just said, oh, got quiet and took leave maybe 20 minutes later. He'd already made plans to go over to her house after dinner to help her with her cable box, so he left shortly after that to head over to her place while I drank some wine with my mom. When he returned, he was super quiet, but said he was tired and went to bed. But last night, he said, at random, my mom kind of has a point. Maybe we should wait until we buy a house so our living situation is a bit more stable. She's not wrong in saying that it should be something we're worried about. I just went silent and didn't comment because I was angry, but he kept making comments like, it'll only be a couple of years, 5 at most. I just took my ring off, handed it to him, and said I was no longer interested. He started protesting and trying to put the ring back on my finger, but I wouldn't let him. I said I was no longer interested in marrying him. Maybe he should move back home with mommy because I know for a fact that that woman will make up another excuse the second we buy a house. I'm really just so turned off at the thought of marrying him at this point because I have 0 business being with a man who has no backbone and will put our lives on hold in favour of a woman who still wants to scrub his back in the shower. He's crying at this point and I'm stupid calm because maybe I'm over it, and told him I wanted him to leave or I could go. But those were the only options. He ended up leaving, sobbing the entire time. I do feel bad. I feel gutted. He means everything to me, but I can't do this anymore. Am I the idiot? His mom has been blowing up my phone with texts, trying to plead her case, and I just texted back and said, no, it's fine, you won. Now you can have your baby boy back full time, and blocked her number. My friends think I'm wildly overreacting. Not the idiot. People think that when a relationship really ends, it's this massive production, but in reality, it's quieter, just like what happened here. I don't know who would honestly tell you you've overreacted because you finally got fed up with his mom literally dictating how 2 adults with careers and a child will live their lives. I don't know why you didn't leave sooner. Finances and stability aside, no grown man should let his mother postpone his wedding 4+ times. Get new friends, OP. Seriously, a 7-year-old relationship, nobody is deployed in the military, this isn't an LDR, 3-year-old engagement. He's allowed mommy to essentially cancel the wedding 4 times and now wants to cancel it again for a couple or 5 more years. Anybody with half of a single working brain cell would give that timeline the side eye, but your friends think you're overreacting, and wildly at that. Possessive mother-in-laws can make their daughter-in-law's lives miserable. Plenty of stories here prove it. It's absolutely insane how many women have to deal with this. I cannot understand how it is so common for men to let their mothers dictate their lives like this. It comes across as so meek and just lame. All of this is to say that the whole thing is baffling to me, and I don't understand how women can put up with it. It seems like it would be a massive turn-off, on top of the obvious annoyance and frustration. But let's look on the bright side here. He and his mother can finally be together. In my social circle, your 50th birthday is a huge deal. It's been a while since I celebrated my birthday. My last real birthday party was Sweet 16. Overall, I've been saving for this party for years, and all the family knows. My son, now daughter-in-law, told me about a year ago that they would get married about a week after my birthday. I told them that it would happen after my 50th birthday, that he'd been to these parties before and that they were a big deal. He literally got blasted at his aunt's 50th before. I told him I would also not tone it down, and he said he didn't care. My party had over 100 guests and had a lot of bells and whistles. My son's wedding was this weekend and both events were compared. It was basically what people were talking about. My son and daughter-in-law were cold to me during the wedding. I got a call from my son, and it basically boiled down to the fact that I needed to apologize for outshining their wedding. People were calling his event cheap and overall preferred my event. I told him I wasn't apologizing, that I'd warned him months ago, and he said he was fine with the party. It wasn't my fault that my party upstaged it. They chose the date, knowing how those parties were. This started an argument, and they both told me I was a huge idiot. It's likely not the idiot. It sounds like they all had the info to see this coming, and assuming you were fully supportive and celebratory about their nuptials. Unless you're not telling us everything and your party was unexpectedly wedding-ish or oddly competitive in a way you would have anticipated and should have avoided. Question: why are your guests so incredibly rude as to compare OP's party with your son's wedding and state that they felt the wedding came up short? I don't know anyone this obnoxious, and I know some obnoxious people. And how much overlap exists between a 50-year-old's birthday party and all the wedding guests? The groom's family would obviously be there at both, but how many friends do they have in common that would be in attendance? Yet OP says it was a big topic of conversation that night. Makes me wonder if she forced her son to invite a bunch of her friends, who then subjected the bride's family and guests to OP's birthday was so much better all night long. Yeah, the whole attitude surprises me. I don't know any parents who would even want one of their 50 birthdays to compare to their child's, hopefully, only wedding. I'm surprised at this group's lack of social graces if the comparisons weren't, "Wow, OP, you really went all out for your birthday, but couldn't you help your son with his wedding?" Everyone's the idiot here. Your attitude about it sucks. I just assure them that their wedding was wonderful. No need to compare, just different milestones in life. Although they shouldn't be asking for an apology with a full warning about the party. This party was important to you and you've been saving for years, but this was your child's wedding. Was it on the actual day of your birthday? Could you have spaced it out a little? Of course, you should get to celebrate yourself, but you seem weirdly all about your 50th birthday, and your child's wedding didn't seem as important. You shouldn't be telling him your party upstaged his. I can see why they're being cold. It may be more your attitude than the party date itself they have a problem with. A little backstory. I, 23 female, had a forced marriage, technically arranged, but I felt like I couldn't say no, at 18. I was very mentally ill and my dad just wanted to get rid of me essentially. I had my son before my 19th birthday, and due to my mental illness and how my in-laws treated me, I never bonded with him. They were a constant presence in my home with my ex-husband and barely let me have my own son, and I had no support from anyone since I was in a new country. I filed for divorce a few months later. My ex-husband won custody of my son because he was a man in his 20s with a stable job, and I was a mentally ill girl with no means to look after this child. After this, I moved back to my mother's country. She never approved of the marriage but was unable to help due to being abroad and other factors, and wasn't allowed to call or visit my son. On to the issue. A few months ago, I got a call from my father. I didn't speak to him because of the marriage he forced me into, so I was surprised to hear from him. Turns out my ex was no longer able to care for our son. He married a woman who didn't want to be a stepmother, and they wanted to know if I could take him. I said yes, and a few weeks later my little boy was in my home, and I had him enrolled in school. It took me a while to get his citizenship sorted, but it's finally been done. As it stands legally in my country, I have sole custody. In my son's country of birth, my ex has also registered with the necessary officials to let them know he's given up my son to me and I have full custody over there too. It took us a few weeks to get used to each other, but he was already calling me mom and telling me he loved me very early on. I took time off work to get to know him better and we're inseparable. It's nearing summer and his grandparents, my ex-in-law, have been asking me to send him to them for the summer. I refused for 3 reasons. They were a big part of why I lost him in the first place. Imagine being newly postpartum, recovering from a horrifying birth experience, being allowed to hold your own baby and having no one to turn to. Everyone who cared about me was in my mother's country. They might not let me have him back, and then I'll have to sue, which will be very expensive and traumatic. I asked him if he wanted to see them, and he said he wanted to stay with me. I passed this information on to them and they're going mad. I'm being harassed on social media, and my family back in their country is blowing up my phone. My ex is also telling me that the only reason he gave my son to me instead of his parents was because he promised them they would still be allowed to see him. They've all been saying I'm an idiot for refusing to let them see my son, but I don't think I'm wrong, given my reasons. I suggested they come visit us, and I would even let them stay in my home, but they have refused. Am I the idiot? A pity that the ex didn't mention that when transferring custody. It's not a promise you made, and you have no obligation to fulfill it, especially as your son has only recently arrived to live with you and you're concerned that he may not be returned. You are not the idiot. If they want to see him, they can come for supervised visitation in your country. This was my first thought too. X has made the classic mistake of writing checks he can't cash. He and his parents don't deserve any leniency unless they can show OP they've managed to change, which they're not displaying so far. OP, you can keep your ex's promise. Send them a picture of your son being happy with you. You have full custody of your son. Neither of you wants to see them, and you don't have to. You need to do what's best for both of you. Sending a preschooler overseas to be without you after such a big upheaval in his life does not sound good for the mental health of either of you. And considering their treatment of you, I highly doubt you would get your son back. Even if you sued, depending on federal laws, you may not be able to, and if you are, it can take years and tens of thousands of dollars. Keep your son with you. Keep reconnecting and rebuilding your relationship with him, and be happy. These people won't make your life happy or healthy. Some of my friends and I have been planning a cross-country road trip this summer, mainly to celebrate another guy and me getting our degrees, but also just because it would be fun. This week we finally went in and planned out a budget, breaking down costs and what each person needs to bring to the table in terms of cash for it all to work out. This is where the issue comes in. One of the guys, 25, supposed to go is essentially unemployed. He lives with his parents and does door dashing on the side sometimes. Since we've been planning this for a while and he's been active in the planning, we kind of assumed he'd been putting aside some cash for it. Turns out he hasn't been. He's completely out of cash, and he hasn't even been door dashing at all for the past couple of months. We're trying to help him out by asking, how much cash do you think you'll be able to get by then? Maybe we can all pitch in and float the difference. He says door dashing barely gets him any money, he won't be able to come up with anything substantial, and it's ridiculous for us to expect him to get enough cash in such a short time, about 2 months. Finally, he sends a message saying he's on the phone with his mom and she's willing to pitch in the cash for his part. I get angry and tell him that we're not going to be taking any cash from his mom, that it's not fair to her and not fair to the rest of us who've actually put in the work to save up for a trip like this. He says, okay, I'm not going then, and now he won't respond to any of us. Now I'm left feeling like an idiot for leaving him out of something we've all been planning together and that he's been so excited about. Am I the idiot? The second a 25-year-old grown man says it's ridiculous to expect him to pay his own way, I'm out. You are not the idiot. OP, he's the dude who will spend all his money by the halfway point and expect you all to cover his lazy butt. He knew about the trip, didn't save money, and fully expects you and your friends to allow him to mooch off you all. You did not leave him out of anything. You gave him ample warning and he chose to not save anything for the trip. That's on him, not you or your friends. For real, there's a reason why he's living with his parents and not working. He's the idiot because he obviously sounds lazy and unmotivated, and those aren't healthy qualities or what people look for in a friend. But you are the idiot because you obviously consider him a friend despite knowing that, but now you're arbitrarily drawing lines about his parents paying for things. He can live with his parents, but his parents can't loan or give him money for a trip. Why do you get to decide what's fair but his mother can't? If you feel this strongly about his situation, then ditch him as a friend. Don't kick him off a trip. My daughter got married about a year ago. She spent about $20,000 on her wedding. It was a wonderful experience for her, but for all the guests, it really sucked. All the money went to things the couple would enjoy. The reason it sucked for the guest was due to multiple factors. The biggest one were that guests had to buy food and drinks and had no entertainment. So people get to the wedding and the ceremony happens. Then they get put into another room after a long day of driving out and don't get any food or drink. Most of them were forced to buy overpriced food since they were starving. They didn't even get any cake since the cake was fake. Overall, it was not a good guest experience. Afterward, it was negatively talked about, and people were actually quite mad about it. My other daughter is getting married and asked for my help. Her sister offered to help, and my other daughter made it clear that she didn't want her wedding to be anything like hers. My daughter asked what she meant by that, and I was honest with her. Her wedding wasn't a good experience for guests, and it's a running joke at this point with family and friends. I thought she already knew since a lot of people hated her wedding. This caused an argument and she called me an idiot in the end. I pointed out all the issues I had with her wedding and she thought I was being cruel. Edit: the money basically went to her dress, venue and photos. I know her dress was $6,000. The venue was pricey and she didn't get the food package. Not the idiot. How does someone spend $20,000 on a wedding and not feed anyone? You totally could have been a touch gentler, but also, OMG, I can't even imagine. A fake cake? Do you hate your guests? Your married daughter appears to possess 0% empathy, logical thinking, and generosity. How do you raise a human like this? Some people are so self-focused that they either can't or won't see the situation through other people's eyes. Your daughter and her husband sound like this because it should have been evident that they were creating a very poor experience for their guests. Your daughter is now being brought into reality about her wedding. She'll go kicking and screaming because to admit this reality is to acknowledge that she's to blame for it and should have seen it coming. But people like her need a good wake-up call, and this is hers. Hopefully this is the only wake-up call she'll need. However, people like her tend to fight reality tooth and nail. Kinda reminds me of a birthday party I was invited to a couple of years ago. The only food available was these tiny packs of peanuts you get on the airplane, and you had to buy them for €5. The birthday girl was a flight attendant who stole them from the airline. People still joke about that. It's time for her to grow up and realize that she is not the most important person in the world and that she needs to start thinking of other people.